Hi, my name is Sophie Herxheimer. My provocation is going to be about my long term project that I've been doing since about 2004, and it's got a rather unwieldy name. It's called Collecting Stories Live in Ink. It's a way that I work which involves kind of temporary collaborations where often I've been asked by an organisation or a residency or a project to work with members of the public or a community group in collecting stories mainly because these people who asked me to do it have seen me do this before, and they realize that this is a nice way to involve people in art, in kind of thinking and sharing and listening and stories. And I don't know, it's a kind of immediate thing, because as an artist and a poet, I've often worked using instinct and spontaneity and interaction. And this project, the story collecting, is part of that, I suppose. So it started off in a shed on an allotment in South London when I had a residency with a project called Feast, which was a project curated by Claire Patey and Cathy Wren, and it was all about encouraging a group of children to grow their own school dinner on an allotment and serve it up one evening to parents and teachers and friends. I was the spring artist. It was a year-long project funded in part by London International Festival of Theatre. I was the spring artist, and as such, I worked with the children and the teachers and the lollipop ladies and everybody on imagining what you would want to grow if you could grow anything. Would you grow world peace? Would you grow a safer planet? Would you grow a gorgeous silver bicycle with fairy lights on the wheels? Would you grow a bigger family? What would you grow if you could grow anything in the world? And I gave them a magic gold bean, and they wrote poems and painted pictures. But the culmination of my part of the residency was in a shed on the allotment where I'd made a paper cut chandelier and some little tinkly cups, and I invited people into the shed to tell me a family recipe or a story, and we were going to make a community cookbook. What happened is I got sidetracked, and the stories around the recipes became so much more interesting to me than the recipes themselves that I began to draw those. And then when we developed this project further, which was partly provoked again by Claire Patey because she invited me to make a tablecloth big enough for 1,000 Londoners to dine at together. And I made on hotel salvage linen a 300-metre tablecloth. I screen printed it at London Printworks Trust, and in each place setting I put a food story that I'd collected from a Londoner. And at that stage, I wasn't collecting them always live, especially as I had a deadline. So I would collect them from people at bus stops, in the shop, anywhere. The school playground when I was picking up my kids. Tell me, what do you like to eat? Who did the cooking in your house when you were growing up? That sounds nice. So, I was always had my notebook and my pen. I still go round without fail with my notebook and pen, and I don't know how people without a notebook can manage, but anyway, they use their phones, and that's good too. So, back to the story collecting. When we had Feast on the Bridge from 2007, I guess my tablecloth started its life, and probably ended in 2012, because then the funding got cut for Feast on the Bridge and the Thames Festival in general. But every year I would have a stall on the bridge, and I would collect people's food stories live in ink. And I'd have a big wad of paper and a photocopier and a helper who's known as the photocopier whisperer, because outdoor photocopier always goes wrong, or even indoors they do, don't they? And a big bottle of ink, nice set of brushes, and I would just sit there and listen. And one by one people would tell me their stories, and I would draw them for them, and I would also write as close as I could possibly get it, their own words. And doing that, I had to really tune into them and find out what was important in the story, because if somebody talks to me for 5 minutes, you can imagine that's like a storm of thousands of words. So where do you start? What do you choose? What line do you begin with? What line do you end with? It was fun tuning in, and also listening carefully for the images in the story, because some people are real poets and they tell you precisely how thin a slice of ham might have been, or they tell you exactly what kind of mountain they were walking up and how long it took. And other people don't. They just say, I was on holiday with my family. And you think, yeah, but how many people in your family? Where were you? Not any old beach, please. Give me the trees, give me the hills. Anyway, you know, I don't really mind what people tell me because the thing is, I kind of like people. And I like that moment of connection where the person rummages in their memory. They think what to tell you, what to share, and then they watch while their own words come to life on a piece of paper in front of them. It's a bit of a magical connection, and it's great. It has a kind of, it's like cutting out the small talk, you know. There you are, just a stranger sitting with a stranger, finding out something kind of deep. Because often what people do tell you is they give you a metaphor for who they really are. So if they tell you about a bowl of porridge, maybe they are a bowl of porridge. If they tell you about a special piece of cutlery, 9 times out of 10, they are a special piece of cutlery. And I mean, I've written about this a lot on my blog if you want to find out more about it. And I've also got many examples of these drawings. I will accompany this provocation with a selection of these food story drawings that I've collected over the years. One thing that's also happened is that I've expanded from the theme of food, which is a great theme and is obviously a universal theme because hopefully everybody gets to eat quite often. And it connects to our families and our stories and where we come from and who we are and where we're going and what we like and what we don't like and our senses and all our relationships. They're all tied up with food. Our belief systems, did I say that? So food is a great universal theme to go in at. But I've worked on many other projects, like one I worked on in the woodlands outside Corby that project was called The Listening Forest, and it was something set up between me and Firminwood's Contemporary Art. And there I asked people about nature and how they viewed the woods and what kind of things they saw in the woods, what did they do in the woods, how did they get through there? And that yielded 200 stories about nature, really, which was very interesting. And we put together in a book, a huge book, a bit like the tablecloth. It was 30 metres long, made by the Henningham Family Press, who is a small publisher that I work with quite often in Dalston. We made a small pocket edition of the book and a huge unwieldy display copy of the book, which I sometimes get the entire members of a school assembly to hold up around a school hall so that they can see it and also be part of it. And kids sometimes ask if it's the biggest book in the world, and I say yes. Anyhow, also on another project recently, I worked outside at Somerset House and I collected stories about life and death for a project curated by an artist duo called Yara and Davina, who'd set up arrival and departure boards like the ones you have at airports, where you could sign up people that you'd lost or people who were recently born or born to you at any time. And you could put the born ones on the arrivals board, their name flickering up in lights, or your departed ones could go on the departures board, also flickering in lights. So quite a beautiful, poignant installation about life and death in this period where we are having to think about that rather a lot. And I had a day there collecting stories about life and death, and I found some very moving stories people told me. And I was very touched. I feel honoured to hear about people's connections with their loved ones, you know, their mothers, their grandmothers, their fathers, their friends, their babies. It's just the real stuff of life. It does take me a couple of days to recover after an event like that because I become a conduit and a carrier of emotional extras, real stuff. So I often have to lie down for a bit. And also the stories stay with me forever. I very rarely forget a story that somebody's told me in this context. And I can surprise people and say, oh yeah, it was you who told me about standing under a mulberry tree and turning purple with all the berry juice. And they'll go, ooh, that was 10 years ago. How do you know? But something about them exchange. It's a genuine exchange because each person gets a copy of their story to take away. They are my collaborator. They are 50% of the art. What they tell me goes in the art. They're the material, the content. I'm the drawer and the servant of the story. So it's a very funny arrangement, but somehow it suits me because I'm a poet and an artist, and using words and pictures together is my natural state of being. So I like the fact that I can use both and that I can dovetail the image with the text and the listening with the looking. It feels like what I should be doing. And so luckily for me, I get plenty of opportunities to do it. Thanks for listening.